We're here today on Monday, August 19th, 2013, with Gwendolyn, Tim Powell, and Ulysses Brooks to talk about their memories, their recollections of the March on Washington on August 28th of 1963. Gwendolyn and Tim, and Ulysses, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Please feel free what you'd like to share, the ride up, even beforehand, your feelings of it. Just start wherever you'd like.
Well, we did take some cars to DC. There was the Youth Council of NAACP, and we were very active during 1963, and of course we had to go to the march. So we had 3 cars, or was it 5?
5.
5 cars, and 1 station wagon amongst the 5 on the road to Washington, D.C. And the trip was uneventful until we got to Jessup, Georgia. Jessup, Georgia was a place that we'd not even heard of. But one of the cars, the station wagon, broke down. Tell them about that.
We were in one of my best friends, his name was Maceo McMillan. We rode together. And when we had the breakdown, I think we were in the post office parking lot. And the police was not comfortable with us being there. They wanted us to go to a truck stop. And we all said, oh no. So Maceo was a person that had a lot of stories, but not necessarily all of them was true. So he was telling us that he had relatives in that city, and nobody believed him. But
Yeah.
Sure enough, he had an aunt and a huge family. So he called them, and they came to this area, took us back to their home. We slept in the cars, on couches, or outside, anywhere we could.
On the floor.
On the floors.
The house, everywhere.
So they provided shelter for us, and later that day, they provided food, and thirdly, they repaired the car.
Repaired the car.
So as a consequence, we were not able to take our White House tour because we got to Washington late. And what was ironic was my friend Maceo, who's passed away, God bless him. My friend Maceo and I, we were the reason that each other was there. So we lived in a Quincy Park, or Quincy Place, one of the two. That's where we stayed, and ironically, it was the postman who let us stay at his house. Name was Maceo. So that's permanent in our minds and memories.
But we stayed in various homes. In fact, I don't remember the name of the family whose home I lived in. But when we got to Washington, it was time for the march. So we rolled in, the sun was coming up, and the people on the radio were talking about all the people coming into town, and they said maybe 20,000. Turned out to be over 250,000, and people were coming from everywhere. And they were talking about the trains and the boats and the planes. It was just very exhilarating. We were just outside of ourselves with joy being there. We got there and there was such a crowd. I'm a hard of hearing person, have been all my life, so I tried to make my way to the front. I kind of lost the group. We knew where we were supposed to meet back, but I don't know where you were.
I was if you look at the protest, the march, if you look in the center of that huge cloud in the Lincoln Memorial, well, we were in the middle. So I've always been a little flip. So I climbed the tree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were up in the tree?
Yeah, to see over the crowd.
Okay.
So I did actually see all the people on stage, but it was a huge event, and I was able to see Martin Luther King and also feel and hear his spirit.
Yes, I didn't hear everything that was said because of my impairment, but I've been able to read the speech over and over many times and understand more of the significance of it now than I did there as a 17-year-old. But just seeing all the people. And when we got back, was it when we got back that we had the arrest, when we got arrested? You remember?
I don't remember that.
No, but there were some incidences on the way because, as you know, the climate was very segregated, and whenever we had to stop, we weren't allowed to go in some of the places, or they would tell us to go around to the back. Or tell them about that experience you had.
I had an experience, if I was telling her the briefly. We didn't have McDonald's and all those fast foods opportunities, so we had to go with bologna sandwiches and Ritz cookies,
And
which I had Ritz cookies in a box and bologna, and that's how we ate. But we were used to that because that's how we survived. And when we got out of the car, we had 5 Caucasian people with us, and one of them was a girl, and she and I were pretty close. So we decided to get out the car together to go and get a Pepsi or Coke. And when we made that move, it was adjacent to White Castle. And during that time, the people were driving the jacked up cars, you know, the tails sitting up, and they spotted us. And as soon as we took back off to the main highway, we had them on our tail. So we were all in fear, wondering what to do, because we couldn't communicate. There wasn't no cell phones, and we couldn't communicate about what the lead car should do. And but we kind of coherently got together and pulled over in a parking lot where there was several busloads of Muslims on their way up to Washington. So that's what saved us.
they call them the fruit of Islam. So they were the ones up on stage when Dr. Martin Luther King and all of the speakers were speaking. They were security for all of us, and it's a remembrance that always lives with us, that we got through all of that. And we had times while we were here when we were demonstrating, attempting to make an impression and make a difference. We demonstrated at the Super Test, the beach, the Tampa Theater, where they're having an event this Thursday, recognition of the march. And we would go to the window with a $100 bill, and we'd tell the lady to give us 2 tickets and keep the change for herself. And she was so nervous. After a while they had to take her out because she was shaking like a leaf, because every time she'd say, well, we don't serve Negroes here. We were called Negroes at that time. And finally they did allow us. Actually, it wasn't the theater that was affected by our marching. It was the merchants, Moss Brothers, Wolf Brothers, those places downtown. People, instead of shopping as they usually do, were standing outside looking.
J.J. Newberry's.
J.J. Newberry.
Woolworks.
And the Merchants Association then called on the biracial committee to come together and say that we've got to do something about this. They're killing our business. And so they made a concession. And what did they do once they decided they would let us come to the Tampa Theater?
They invited us in groups of couples of 5 couples. So it was 10 people allowed at the one time. And I was among the first.
Was what?
Was among the first.
Among the first, right.
Yeah.
So you mean like on any given night of a show is playing, only 10 African Americans
No,
would be in?
they gave us a date that we could go.
Oh, wow.
And they were allowed 5 couples to go at the same time. So it was just we were like the test dummies.
Right. And the theater didn't stay open much longer after that, did it? As a theater?
No, it turned into
Just a performing arts center, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then we weren't doing much in there again because we didn't host any events. But then the Ebony Fashion Fair started being held there, and other events. The Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority had their Miss Teenage Tampa event there, so other events started happening there at the Tampa Theater. But prior to that, we had 2 theaters. One was the Lincoln Theater and the Carver Theater. The Lincoln was on Central Avenue, and the Carver Theater was on Main Street, and that's where we went to the theater. And the Super Test, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was a service station. and that you buy gas, and they give you some coupons, and you could use those coupons to go to their amusement park, which was out near Carver City, which was a community where Negroes had built homes. So we wanted to, our advisor, Mr. and Mrs. Stanford, Charles and Betty, lived in that community. And one night we went to the super test, we were trying to get in, and they told us they weren't gonna let us in. And when we left, some hecklers, teenage whites, followed us, ran us away from there and followed us, and so that we went into the neighborhood where Mr. and Mrs. Stanford lived, went to their house, pulled into their driveway, turned off the light, and hid down in the car while they raced up and down the streets looking for us. Eventually they got tired, and we were able to go in the house and
catch our breath. Pepsi also was involved with it. They started allowing us to go to the movies and stuff with a bottle top. So once the big Powell people started getting a play into it, things got a little easier. But
So you said that you were was part of a youth group with the NAACP. Was that something that you originated through school, through your parents? Like, what brought you into that youth group that you all were in?
Yeah, it was the youth council of NAACP.
and
Did you join that through school? I mean, through or just was it? Or how did you learn about the organization? I mean, and how did you get involved with that?
I was a paper boy, and I sold a flower Sunday, and I was up on all of the goings on at that time, and so I wanted to be a part of it. And plus the fact that I grew up, my mom was killed at the age of 37, and my mom died during that time. I was 11, so I was disappointed, and I couldn't understand how my mama left me, you know. And so anyway, I wanted to do something because I didn't like when I was coming up. She had to. We were outside a place called Keysville, and I didn't like it because she had to say yes sir, no sir to people younger than her. And I stood behind the door and rebelled, and I said, I'm going to help do something about this. So that's why I was inspired.
And my mother was involved in the NAACP, and so I naturally followed her, and the youth council was organized. I became a part of it, and at that time I was serving as president of the council. But there were many members of our class who were part of it, who had fundraisers. We helped the adults with voter registration, passing out information and helping them to recruit people to come to register to vote, and also the marches, the demonstrations that we did. And Maceo and I were two who were arrested at the Morrison's cafeteria because we wanted to eat there. And although most of the waiters and the cooks were Negroes, they would not allow us to eat there. And we didn't know what was going on in there. We just wanted to have the opportunity, if we wished, to eat in the Morrison's cafeteria. And the day we went there, we stood in the line. They had 2 serving lines, and the people in the line ahead of us were talking to us as though it was a natural thing for us to be there. But when we got to the front of the line, they closed the line off, and everybody had to go to the line on the other side. And when we got to the front of the line, they closed the line off. They did that several times, and finally the manager came out and told us that he was going to have to ask us to leave, and if we didn't leave, he was going to call the police and charge us with trespassing. And so we said, well, we just want to get some lunch. And so he called the police, and of course we knew we were going to be arrested, so the bail bondsman and our attorney were there waiting for us. I think the time that we spent in the holding cell and being processed was about a 2-hour period, and then we were released. It was after the march that the law was passed, of course, and we they decided that they would let us eat where we wanted to eat. I never went to Morrison's. Not that one anyway. This is the one that was downtown. It closed. I don't know if it closed because of the demonstrations or what, but there was one at West Shore Plaza.
Yeah.
Many years later I went, but Rogers Diner was the place to go.
For us. And I was tested very much at that march on Morrison's.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little pesky guy. And I wanted to be in the front of the line, and the line would only move so far, and then they'll turn around, go back the other way. Well, once I was at the end of the line, then next time you're gonna be in front of the line. And I got up to the crowd, where the crowd would let me, as far as they'll let me go, and a guy spat in my face.
Mm.
And that's when I knew I had converted to the nonviolent.
Right.
But somebody did pay that night.
Right. Nonviolent. We were. I didn't have that incident, and I'm very thankful that I didn't have anybody spit on me.
Yeah, it was very painful. I never got over it.
I know. Can you imagine?
I spoke with Jetty Wilds.
Oh, yeah.
He said his wife, someone dumped, cracked an egg on her head, and he said she really liked having her nice hair, and it's awful. I mean, it's just beyond. I mean, something you can't, and like you said though, you can't, because you want to make it bigger than just that one particular thing. So you have to have that perspective.
It's kind of ironic that we're doing this now, doing the Trayvon Martin problem, but we were knocked off our feet because of Trayvon Martin, because we thought we had worked so hard and made a difference, and then
But it's always been
body
subtle,
slammed us. Yeah.
and that's what we didn't fully understand. We didn't think that racism was as bad, if you will, in Tampa as it was in some other places until we got into the fray of things and understood. And even now, to realize that there are laws on the books that allow people to kill you and say, I was standing my ground because I feared for my life, even though you're the only one with the weapon, is subtle racism, whether we admit it or not. The law is subtle racism. And so we have moved, we have progressed, but it seems like we've taken some steps back, and certainly things have been happening all along undercurrent, and it comes out every now and then, and this is one of those instances where it has come out. And so our work is cut out for us even more.
Yeah, we're disappointed that we thought we had come so far, and to be that blatant is a little scary.
So it seems like you, I've spoken to a lot of people, and some people have been very involved in activism, protest. Some people, like I said, just decided they wanted to go, but it seems like for you both, the march was a natural progression of where you were going with things. It was definitely a political choice to go. It was lots of reasons to go, to experience it. Did you understand the greatness of it then, like how it was a big moment in time, or did it seem like it just was part of your summer that year? I mean, did you understand we'd be sitting here 50 years later? Did it seem that big to you then?
To me, it all was about growing up in Keysville, outside of Tampa, and I was from a family of 9 children, the last boy, and I wanted to be smart. I really did want to be smart, but my mother and father was not educated, so they couldn't help us when we came home from school. But I was just amazed by the dignity of them to have us work during school time. And during school time, and that's when strawberries are growing. So we had to go out and work for the strawberries. And when I went to school, I wasn't able to keep up with the class and keep up with the things because I had lost ground, working, and I had no business working. So
Right.
I said that the only thing I could do is to try to change it, because I had started to feel like people were better than me, and I knew deep down inside, ain't no way.
Right?
So that was my inspiration.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the beginning for me. As I said, my mother was actively involved, and so it's always been about doing what you can for others who have less than you, and making an effort to make a difference in our lives. And I continue to work. I'm not a member of the NAACP, and I don't want to make it seem like because there's no chapter in the Virgin Islands, I'm not a member. I used to maintain my membership, but it's difficult to have so many memberships because there's always fees involved. And so I continue to working with persons with disabilities, working with health disparity issues. Is my passion has to do with helping others. And so I wish I had known that you didn't have a mentor. I could have been your mentor because I was smart.
That's what we respected. It was the adults, because they were like the prominent people, the lawyers, the preachers, and we've always looked up to her because she was always an honor student and all that. So I said, and I was a little boy without a mama, and had to learn a lot of things on my own. And so I kind of clinged to the coattails of the adults that were helping us and the smart people that I knew in high school. And so this is my contribution to the world, is going to Washington, marching, having worked. I never finished high school, but I had managed to work at GTE for 14 years in the office,
Okay.
in my suit and tie, and it all was about the March on Washington, because we had a gathering from GTE at Clearwater, and we were supposed to get up and talk about the best times of our life in the school that we attended and all. So I was sitting there nervously waiting for my turn, and I was thinking, what am I going to say to match these people? And then finally, I told them that the greatest moment of my life, besides being born, was the March on Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned out to be, that put me on a pedestal.
All right.
Yeah.
Good deal.
You remember Herb Currington?
Yes.
He passed away,
Oh, I didn't know that.
2 nights ago.
Oh.
But he was working in the personnel department.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to kind of cover up for all my little stuff, because I was a little instigative, but it's all had the purpose of I was just as good as anybody.
That's right. Always was. That's right.
What was the ride home like? Were you exhausted? Was it celebratory? Did you come right home that night, or did you, after the march, did you stay overnight then? Did you drive back? Or
After the march, we stayed there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a party going on in Washington. It was
It was good.
outrageous. And me and Maestro promised that we were going to talk to a girl from 50 states. We got up to 37.
He said that he was starting to think that people were better than him. He didn't say he thought.
No, never thought that.
And he was definitely a smooth talking young man. He could get any of the girls. And in addition to the March on Washington, I've made it a point to try to be involved in most of the other events that have happened, singular events, sort of like when they unveiled the Mary McLeod Bethune statue. I didn't know all of what went on, but I was there for that. And of course, I had to be at the inauguration of the first African-American president. And so we were there in the crowd being pushed along. That was an exhilarating experience too, because it was so cold and so many people, but nobody was angry. Everybody was shoving, but we were just shoving together and moving,
Trying to stay
shove.
Trying to stay warm.
Trying to stay warm and trying to get to the parade route. That's where we were trying to get to. And we made it to the parade route. I was was there right in the front. If the security guard didn't stop me, the president and Mrs. Obama got out of the car just before coming to us to walk, and so they were walking down the street, but I couldn't get to them because the security guard wouldn't let me. But this year I'd had hip surgery a couple of years ago, so my daughter wouldn't let me walk. So I went to it was the Council of Negro Women had a building on Pennsylvania Avenue, the only one owned by African Americans on Pennsylvania Avenue, and they hosted a party. You had to pay, of course, but so that we could watch the parade from the building. The only thing we didn't like there is that the President and Mrs. Obama, on the first inauguration, because Mrs. Dorothy Heights, who was on the podium at the March on Washington, was still alive, the President and Mrs. Obama got out of the car in front of the building. This time, they didn't get out until further down the road, so all of us in the building were a bit disappointed because we were looking forward to that. But we were there for that as well. And we're looking forward to the reenactment. However, it might not happen. But our hearts, our spirit will be there.
It always be with us, because it was one of the most fearful events that I've ever challenged, and we got through it.
I spoke with them, like I said, many people, and they said how it was such a, like you're saying, a party atmosphere the whole time. People were just together and talking and milling about and walking, and you'd meet people, and you see either famous or not famous walking by, talking to people in the crowd. A gentleman said he spoke to a bunch of congressmen who were there, and it was just really people were coming together and just talking about things and hanging out and listening, or it sounded like it was a lovely day.
It was one of the greatest days that I've witnessed. The night of the march, we started seeing people when we drove in of all nationalities. It wasn't just black people, but that was when we knew that we had made a difference, because the people that was them became us, and that was after they killed a clergyman in Alabama with a 2x4.
Oh.
That's when the actors and everybody started coming out, Senator Portier and all of them. It was a very special time.
Did you all have instructions from your, I say chaperone for lack of a better word, the elders that were up there with you? Did you get what you should be wearing, how you should be acting? Like, did you feel that there was, I don't want to say rules, but were they looking out because you were younger to make sure that you acted a certain way? Because I know that the event was very organized, and supposedly I heard from everybody that people were just making sure they never dropped garbage, everyone picked up after themselves. Like, did you have an idea of how to behave, being that you were the younger ones, or was it talked about when you get there, make sure you do this or that, or no one, or you just all kind of knew how to be? I mean, you're like the drivers in the car, was anybody telling you guys or anything like that?
We knew what we were supposed to do because we had already passed the test downtown Tampa, and we were handpicked.
Wow.
To be the ones to make that trip, and all the NWCU Youth Corps didn't go. It was just a few of us children, but most of them were adults. But they needed some young blood, and I'm happy to have been that.
Me too. And the way to act, our upbringing as children was how to be mannerable. You don't drop paper on the floor and not pick it up. You don't leave the chair, and when you get up from the table, you put the chair under the table. You say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And you always present yourself on your best behavior. Don't shame the family. Don't do anything to shame the family. Beyond that, as youth council members, when we're here in Tampa, many of our meetings, we were taught nonviolent. He didn't do anything to that guy who spat in his face, because we were trained not to. Don't respond that way. Keep calm. All of that was a part of our training for the march, for our demonstrations. Get out of the way, don't let anybody hurt you, but don't be striking back and those kinds of things. So when we got to Washington, it was natural for us. First of all, it was our own home training that we had, plus the preparation that we had as council members.
And they decided when they got me to take that spit and didn't respond, they said, okay, let's go, we got it, we can go now.
Because, we didn't want to get into anything. We had been reading about the fire hoses and the dogs and all of that people were doing in other places. And of course, we did not want to be a part of that kind of thing.
During that time, it wasn't the internet and nothing going on. Everything was kind of slow. So we would go downtown and we gathered at St. Paul's Street on Marion. And we marched during the day, and at night we would go and sit down and have a sit-down meeting with the grown-ups. And at a couple of those meetings, we were advised that Medgar Evers had been killed. The media wasn't like it is today. And we were told about the bombing in Alabama during our meeting. So that kind of got a lot of fear, but still more drive. We said, we know we're going to be scared, but we're going to do this.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
we were willing to die, and thank goodness we did.
Yes.
But
we wanted to live.
Yeah, of course.
And when we were marching, I remember when we were marching and demonstrating at the Marston's cafeteria, there was one pastor in particular, Reverend Tard, who lashed out at us. He said that we were publicity seekers, and he thought that we had moved too quickly, that the biracial committee was making headway and what have you. But as far as we were concerned, the time was right for us to do this. And so when we were told that the merchants had called for a meeting and some progress was being made in their discussion, then we stopped the demonstration. But our attorney Francisco Rodriguez, gently chastised Reverend Tard. They were friends, and he said he hoped that when he finished his chastisement that they would still be friends, but he felt that the young people were perfectly in their right, and we had advisors. We weren't just hotheads moving on our own. We had advisors who were working with us, and he wanted Reverend Tard to join us instead of speaking against us. So we had adults on both sides who were supporting us and who thought maybe we were moving too quickly, but it all worked out, and we didn't have any real violence, so to speak, until, when was that, 1968, when Chambers was
Martin
killed?
Chambers, yeah.
Yeah, he was shot in the back, and then that's when we had the riot on Central Avenue, and a lot of our businesses were burned down. And
they only burned the neighborhood businesses, so it wasn't hurting anybody but us.
That's all.
So my position then was, because I'm always trying to be on the side of what's right, and my position then was they created instead of fighting against the police and the guys throwing Molotov cocktails and what have you, I joined another group called the White Hats.
The White Hats, that's right.
And we were a liaison between the police and the black community, because I didn't want my brothers to be slaughtered.
Right.
And that's what was going to happen.
That's right.
So we had to work, the White Hats were working in the neighborhood to try to calm things down, because we knew that we had not a chance if we had gone the other way.
That's right.
How did you feel people in the neighborhood thought of you? I mean, was there some people who, there's always going to be people thinking that you're probably selling out, or are they thinking, I mean, you have probably both, I'm assuming.
It was a love-hate thing, because for me, I was quite a mess. And for me to be one of the White Hats, I got a lot of respect for that, because I was doing it mostly for them, because I knew that laws and nothing was on our side. So I got a lot of love and a little bit of hate.
That's right. And those young men who were the White Hats were handpicked also for their knowledge of the community and the community's respect and knowledge of them. And so because they knew that if they were White Hats, then that meant something. And they were going to go out into the neighborhood and help us to calm down. Because we, as he said, we only heard ourselves. It turned out all of our businesses. Central Avenue then became,
Ghost town.
now it's a park.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but at that time there was so many, that was our lifeblood. That was where we had our businesses, our restaurants, and our community centers.
That was our Igbo city.
Exactly. How long would the White Hats organized for?
It was only a couple of years, and then what they did was they came up with a program called TCEP. And TCEP was a place where a lot of black men with education, a lot of teachers and all, were brought in to kind of like start this development program. And what they did was invite us to different meetings. They invited us to school. They invited us to training, and consequently, when we did all of those things, we were able to understand what the move was about. But I just kind of lost my
TCEP.
Yeah.
TCEP was Tampa Concentrated Employment Program. That was a program basically through the federal government. They were having set programs around the country, and as Ulysses was saying, it was employment program and training program, so that people who were, and everybody was looking for work, and you could find an opportunity there, have training if you needed it. And I worked at TCEP as a supportive services coordinator, so that if a person was being put on a job and they needed steel-toe boots or a uniform or whatever, I was the person they would come to write out the vouchers for them to get that. And so many of us who had been involved in the movement were able to either become a part of the program or work in the program, or just to help develop jobs for our community.
I got the job through there for GTE, and I worked there for 14 years. My wife was given a job at Airborne Freight.
Where?
Airborne. It was
okay.
Back of UPS.
Mm-hmm.
And also my mother-in-law and my friend Barbara Godfrey, who lived in the projects at the time, the two of those went to nursing school in the University of Florida. My mother-in-law became a registered nurse, and Barbara Godfrey is currently an attorney in Orlando, Florida. And her daughter, Tasha, is a state attorney in Orlando.
Gwendolyn, when you were at the first inauguration, you said you were on the street at the time. Did you have thoughts then about being in Washington? I mean, it's a unique experience. You're seeing the first African-American president and his inauguration, thinking back that, I don't know, that might have been maybe 42 years or something,
mm-hmm.
or whatever years
mm-hmm.
before that you were there for the March on Washington. It must have been a neat feeling to say that you witnessed both of these amazing events.
Yes, in fact, I like to try to say, I was right there. I can't really say where I was in all of the crowd. Ulysses can tell you he was in a tree, but he doesn't know where the tree was.
Yeah, I know about where it was.
So whenever I see a picture of the march, and when at one point, not at the first inauguration, but yes, to answer your question, it was very exhilarating, and that's why I had to be there. Even when I went for the unveiling of Mrs. Bethune's statue, and I also was there when they unveiled the Martin Luther King statue as well. I was supposed, they had to reschedule the ceremony, mm-hmm. but I was able to see it during the public viewing before the earthquake and hurricane came through in Washington. But every time I go to Washington and every time I get a chance to say, I was there. I don't have any pictures, and I'm sad to say that. I did have some memorabilia, but I haven't really been able to find it. In traveling, I must have lost it, or it's packed somewhere where I can't find it. But and I think that's why whenever there's something significant happening, I want to be there because it just recaps for me that great day in 1963 when we arrived in the city and the sun was coming up and we were rising. It was a wonderful day.
And we feel like after doing that, we feel like we had the ability, the know-how to change everything, because that was a milestone.
And I have a daughter who lives in Washington, so I get to go often, and I try to pass on to my granddaughters who live there about the march and about the things that we've done. And they don't fully understand the significance of it. In fact, Grandma, it's the human race. It's the human rights. And in everybody, and I said, you're absolutely right, because what we were fighting for, we said civil rights, and we were fighting for equality, but equality for everybody, for access for everybody is what we were fighting for. Although that's another story I could tell about what we really got.
So that, anything else, I mean, as far as the day of, you want to talk about anything? I love the evening, the 50 states made me laugh very much out loud. And then you stayed overnight, you came back the next day, and did you tell all your friends and family about it when you got back here? And was it, you know, did people want to know what it was like and everything?
Everybody knew, because it was a big, big deal. And we were a selective group, but all of us were popular in our own way. You know, there was a lot of smart kids and some stuff, but and I was a little pesky guy that was along. So we had a mixture of mostly girls.
Mostly girls.
Yeah, we had a mixture of smart people who wanted to be smart, and then the grown-ups who led us and watched over us for our parents.
Yes, they did. And I thought we were all smart. I mean, he's saying he wasn't smart, but he was very smart. And we looked up to him, and basically he was the man, one of the men for us girls that we looked to protect us.
Yeah, and
So that he says he wasn't smart is a surprise to me.
Yeah, Ulysses, yes, not that you need to hear it from me, but you had this most amazing life. You have to know that. I'm sure it started when you felt younger, some unhappiness maybe when you were younger, but your life is this amazing full life.
Yeah.
Small for me is the fact that I've done what I wasn't supposed to do. I worked at GTE for 14 years in the accounting department, and
accounting now.
Yeah,
okay.
But I was there when the computers started, and pretty much after computers got smarter, I was pushed out of my job because technology had taken over.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really proud of myself. And smart is two things to me. It's a combination of education and a combination of education. And I got the education, and together with the education, we was able to do what we done.
Yes, yes. And I sold the computers, so I didn't know it push you out of your job.
You was involved.
But yes, he's a smart man. I let him tell you.
Go ahead, sorry. I would say, how long has it been since you two seen each other?
It had been, I think, 40 years.
It had been a long time.
Yes, I only since the March. I don't recall seeing you.
Well, I saw you a couple of times when with my brothers, a couple of times, but it was about 6 months ago now that we ran into each other. When we were I was here, and we happened to be at the credit union at the same time, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he remembered me before I remembered him. I knew he was familiar.
Well, she doesn't. She probably hasn't changed a bit. I mean,
no,
look at her.
I could see it. Yeah,
so thank you. But we started talking, and then we started talking about the march, and then one thing led to another, and we said we should have a reunion, and that's how we sent the correspondence to the newspaper, and here
That's
we
how
are.
we got here.
Yeah, and I lost him because he gave me his phone number, and I spoke with him one time, I guess maybe 2 times after that, once I got back to St. Thomas, and I told him I was gonna send the thing to the paper and everything, but then I misplaced his phone number and I wasn't able to speak to him, so I'm so happy that we got back in touch.
Well, from the newspaper article, a couple of days afterwards, I dropped into the Florida Sentinel and talked with Gwen
Okay,
and let her
Good.
know that I was intouchable.
okay,
I was on, and it turned out to be that I'm the only, I know Rovina Thomas. I used to see her at the drugstore. That's where
Okay.
everybody meeting at the drugstore.
okay,
But I used to see her, so other than that, I don't know anybody else who was alive. I didn't know that Bob Sanders had passed away until you told me.
who,
Mr. Bob Sanders.
oh, right,
Yeah.
he and Mrs. Saunders passed away. And I did get an email from Mrs. Stanford, youth advisors, saying, but I have a feeling that somebody else wrote the email, although it was in her name, because I responded right away and a couple of times, but I've not been able to get a response again. But most of the people have passed away, you're right, too.
Do you mean Mr. Saunders, the library, Robert W. Saunders?
Mm-hmm.
Did he go with you off to this?
He wasn't in the car, was he?
He was one of the.
He was in one of the
He was
cars?
one of the cars, yeah.
Well, Ulysses, we'll definitely have to exchange phone numbers if you're okay, because this is something that, just like, of course, the timing to do this, but the Saunders Library is going to actually, they're going to take it down and rebuild a new center there, a library, a cultural center, a research center, still called Robert W. Saunders, and that's going to happen in the next year or so.
Okay.
And we actually won a grant for StoryCorps, and StoryCorps is oral histories as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if especially Gwendolyn, if you're back in town, we could do this again, more about, I'd love to hear more Tampa memories like we're talking about here. That, it would all be about local history,
Okay.
local African American history, and you all, I mean, you have so many memories to
Oh,
share,
yeah.
so
Yes.
many memories.
We did a lot with Mr. and Mrs. Saunders, in fact, and when I was youth council president, they took me with them to Chicago to a national NAACP convention, and in fact, I mentioned in his book,
Wow.
he talked about one time when we were at the biracial committee meeting, and another one of the members, Teresita Van, took off her shoe. I think that had come from Khrushchev had done that.
Yes, he
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
Yes, he had. It's true. It's true.
So she took off her shoe and banged it on the table because we were not pleased with the progress that they were making. So that was when we decided we were gonna go out there and demonstrate.
I sold peanuts and did all kind of little odds and ends to earn my money for that
Mhm.
trip.
I don't even remember how I got my money, but I got to go.
Yeah.
But they raised money, and everybody helped. Even some of the youth who didn't go helped raise money.
Right. Because like I said, they selected.
Mhm.
You know, we were cherry picked, and the ones who had shown the ability to
Not
be staked.
fight back.
Yeah, yeah,
That was key.
yeah. That was
Because they
key.
didn't want any of us getting hurt. So there are lots of stories to tell about living here in Florida, in Tampa, and having black skin. That some people don't want to hear, but could be quite enlightening to our children especially. So I'm happy to be here with you, and especially with Ulysses to be here because he has great memory.
Thank you.
And he's a smart man.
Well, I think we're one of the smartest.
Yeah.
It's been an honor to have you both here, an honor, and I really don't want this to be a goodbye because I think that we'd love to stay in touch, and especially with the Saunders and the project, I would love to have you speak. It might be with me or some other of my associates, and we might talk
Mhm.
again. We have to talk again.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Sounds
And-
good to me.
Go ahead. When is that gonna be?
Well, we're having actually have an official training. That's actually this week. It's going to be Wednesday and Thursday. when StoryCorps, which is based out of, I think they're out of Brooklyn, I want to say, but it's all over the country, and you might have heard them on NPR or not. It's basically what they like is sometimes interviews, but sometimes just conversations that they actually enjoy for families, for organizations, but so things are not forgotten. And so we are doing the training, like I said, this week, and then we're going to kind of kick off the program. Do you know Cora Dunkley by any chance? She is a USF professor. She's going to do a program for us the last Saturday in September at the Saunders Library to announce what we're going to do with the StoryCorps. She's a storyteller. She's going to tell some stories as well, and we'll have some refreshments and just probably an overview of the plans for the next year. So I'll
when
make
is
sure
that?
That would, whatever, I want to say again like the 26th, whatever the last Saturday of the month is in September. But I will make sure we have each other's email address, Gwendolyn. I'll make sure I'll stay in touch with you. And do you have email address too, Ulysses?
I do not.
But I'll make sure I get your phone number before you go, okay? And I will let you know when everything is, so you can come in at your convenience. We'll speak with you again, okay?
And who's the professor again?
Cora Dunkley. She was, her mentor was Henrietta Smith. Henrietta, I think it was her name. Henrietta's very well known it's a library school community, so.
Okay,
but
she's here?
Yeah, they're both USF professors.
Okay.
I think Henrietta might have passed, I'm not sure, but Cora Dunkley is who's gonna be here, like I said, that Saturday.
Okay.
And she, like I said, and you know, Fred Hearns, Fred will be there
Yes.
as well.
I know
okay?
Fred.
Yeah, Fred.
Well, there's a person,
So, okay, let's just wrap up and we'll talk a little bit more. Thank you so very, very much. It was wonderful to hear your memories. It seems like it was a magical day. I know it's not finished yet, we all know that, but I felt that everyone has said that there was a moment that you felt that this was humanity at its best, America at its best. Did you feel that way that day? Did you feel it was this shining moment?
Yes, and having this meeting is a result of that feeling. So thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.